Hey, everybody. Welcome to our session today on the state of SEO and what to expect in 2024. There have obviously been a lot of changes that have happened to search over the last year. There are some really big ones coming in the months and years ahead. Google's got some plans that we'll talk about. So I just want to thank you all on LinkedIn for joining us today. We're going to probably go for 45 minutes to an hour. We'd love to answer any questions that you all might have. But otherwise, we'll have a spirited discussion here amongst the panel here. Between the three of us, I think we can say we've got decades of SEO experience, both on the technical side and the content side. So we're going to go ahead and get right to it and do some introductions. And I'll start with myself. My name is Tim Fullerton. I'm the founder of Fullerton Strategies, which is a digital marketing agency that handles all type of marketing needs for our clients across the board. And before that, I was a VP of content at WeWork, which oversaw the SEO program there. I was Chief Digital Officer of State of New York, and I was in the Obama administration and his first presidential campaign. So that's a mouthful. So now I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Parker to introduce herself.
I always love it when I have to follow Tim's resume, especially when you end with Obama. My name is Rachel Parker. I have been in the kind of online digital space for the better part of I can't believe I'm about to say this, 25 years. And I started out my career, so-called career as a filmmaker, decided that was not a good long-term financial strategy. So I took my storytelling skills and became a marketer. And I've been working ever since in kind of tech space. I've worked for, I kind of survived the SaaS transition. And my specialty is really the intersection of content strategy, and brand messaging. Including really helping people uncover opportunities to write content and create content strategies targeted around search.
Excellent. Ryan?
It's great. Thanks, guys. My name is Ryan Pitcheralle. I am an expert SEO. I have over 15 years in the space, crafting SEO strategies for large enterprises. And lately, my specialty has become AI content strategy. So I'm looking forward to discuss a lot of that with you guys today.
Great. Well, as the viewers, which we've already got 45 people on here, which is super great. Just a reminder that if you have questions as we go through, please just drop them in the chat and we'll make sure that we try to get through as many of them as possible, because we also know it's more interesting to watch when there is a dialogue rather than just three people talking at you. So, but we're going to start that way. So the first question that I'm going to kick off with, and this is for both of you, is, how have you seen SEO change over the last year? Like, what are some of the things that have been shifting, and what are some of the things people should be thinking about in 2024?
I'll
Ryan,
go first. Yeah, let me jump in. What I've seen that was quite profound is this race where everyone was building out a hub and spoke model to their content, which was a good strategy. There is an effort to build these really strong inventories, so lots of spokes. And AI has become kind of instrumental in generating a lot of spokes. That hub and spoke model, becoming more and more competitive, lost a little bit of its steam, and kind of see things start to shift where your spokes need to be more multimodal, meaning it's not just text-based stuff. You need to build spokes that is rich with imagery, rich with video, and particular types of video at that. That's what I've seen. Rachel, where have you seen it go?
Well, I've seen it go initially. So you're more kind of embedded in kind of the really specific, I would say probably tactical SEO stuff than I've been in the last 12 to 24 months. But what I've seen is what I almost always see, which is that when there's this much money that floods the zone of a new technology, everybody just adds it to everything, right? Like it's like kale or something. Like you just can't have a salad anymore made with lettuce. It's got to be made with kale. And AI is the new kale. And so sometimes it's great. And sometimes you're like, that is additive and it makes sense. And like, I want to have it here, but in other instances, it doesn't belong there. It's not the right tool. So one of the reasons that I'm really glad we're doing this is because it leaves people that aren't knowledgeable in the space disoriented and confused, and it gives them this like catch up FOMO moment strategy where they're just like, well, if I don't have AI built into something, if it's not integrated into something, if we're not using it in our email client, if we're not using it in our whatever, then we're gonna lose out. And like, one of the things that I always want to tell people is just like, look, yeah, things are going to change, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, today, but like, take a breath. That's what I'm seeing is people need to take a breath. People need to just take a deep inhale and exhale. And there's when a strategy, when a technology comes along that's this exciting, powerful. I don't think anybody's arguing it's not powerful. There are always, 17 different conversations that happen around it. And I think a lot of business people, even business communication people, are sort of left wondering, I don't know what part of this spoke I should attach myself to. And then they get yelled at from people who they work for saying, well, why aren't we doing more with AI? And they're like, well, because we don't need kale. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
and everybody has to like kale too. So it's larger companies, a larger enterprise. There's tons of teams.
That's what we should
Everybody's
call this webinar.
Got to agree
Everybody
with
has to like
stuff.
kale. Sorry.
Yeah, everybody's got to eat the kale off the table. If they're not gonna, then they're sitting on their hands. And that's a really good point that you bring up. People should feel uncomfortable, and they should feel like they're missing the boat. You have to be working with these solutions, and you have to start universally exposing teams along the same workflows with the same tools. You're trying to establish specialization. And right now we have a lot of fragmentation with all of the capabilities that these new tools have kind of ushered into the space. That's what's making people feel very uncomfortable. And that's what's creating a lag in both the inventories that these things could produce very well for brands, and also the quality that comes out of it when they do produce those things. So I think quality is where we go next in this conversation.
Yeah. Well, let me like take a step back and go up a little bit to the 10,000 foot view, right? Like it's quite daunting for a lot of businesses, right? To think about SEO, right? Like they're building products, they're building technologies, like they don't necessarily know this stuff. And a lot of them don't have big marketing teams, right? Like many instances, like we see, when we get brought in on client projects, there's like one person, right? And they don't have time to do all these things. But I also want to a little bit caution, like obviously, yes, Ryan, there's the part about being uncomfortable, but I also want to say like there is still a lot of things that can be done on the content side that still work, right? Like, I mean, we'll give an example. Like we had a client last year they're an AI technology company, and we're sort of raising the alarms about companies not trusting ChatGPT because the second you put information in there, it's theirs forever. And so we came up with them a listicle of like all the companies that had banned ChatGPT, and it was literally a listicle and literally linked back to source material. And it's the number one search for companies that have banned ChatGPT. So there is still like that traditional approach works, but I think you're hitting on some really interesting things. And my question to you in the follow-up is like, how do these businesses start to prepare for the technical shifts that are happening that, like, Ryan, you and Rachel know inside and out, but they're kind of going, oh my God, like, what do I do here?
Yeah, I think you begin with the people, right? Even if it's a small organization, it's time to anoint a AI czar. There are AI implementation specialists. There are AI creative content producers. There's all types of these applications where AI can be a remit at an organization of any size. So even if you're a one-person shop, it's time to either become that AI czar for yourself or bring someone in who will activate this technology within your organization, will enable it within your tech stack, and start to define what these standard procedures are with these standard tools to get the outcomes desired. Things like content strategy kind of create a framework around that. But I believe it's time to anoint these people and have official titles within all sizes of organizations. I think it'll do wonders.
Well, I think the interesting thing about that, Ryan, is that you could actually do it two ways too, right? Like you could hire somebody, or you know, it is part of a marketing agency that is like, I mean, well, the three of us are talking about this. There are ways to dip your toes in without also like, you know, dedicating these resources that you really don't necessarily know how to use. But it kind of leads me to the next question. I'm going to start with Rachel on this. That's about this, because AI, obviously very powerful. Most people are familiar with ChatGPT or Bard or even Claude 3 that has recently come out. But there's an issue of quality that is coming from these tools, right? Like anybody can go in and say, write me an SEO optimized article for X. But Rachel, I'd love to hear from you on like when you have seen that type of stuff, like how close are they on the quality? Like, have we completely replaced humans? Or, you know, which, I mean, I know my answer, but like, I want to hear from the content expert about this one.
Well, I'll answer it this way. So if right now your job is to, or the way that you make money is by running a 20 to 25, your 2025 kind of URLs that have highly optimized content that refer people to affiliate links, and that's how you make money. I would strongly consider a pivot right now because you have time. There's runway. It's not going to end like, you know, it's not going to all stop tomorrow. But those kinds of business models that sort of showed up in the Google era are, I think, you know, Ryan may disagree with me, but I think that those are, you know, maybe they're not linear television today, but I don't think they're long for this world. But I also don't think, I mean, I use GPT as more of like a kind of an I'm stuck and help me kind of get sort of through this awful paragraph I don't want to write because I'm just having a rough morning. But I also use it because I'm looking up things like give me a synonym for this because I don't want to have to go to Google. So I think that's what's interesting is that one thing, looking at it from kind of the outside in instead of kind of talking about sort of how to use it as an enterprise tool, is how do people engage with content from the outside in? And I think that people have been understandably dissatisfied with sort of the static nature of search because there's really one company that sort of tells us how to behave. And it is so much less time consuming for me to look up a synonym for complex or industrious on ChatGPT than it is, which is one of the tools that I use, than it is on Google. But as far as like replacing humans, I mean, again, it depends on what you do. If you make money writing blog content on Fiverr, maybe it's time that you think about how you're going to use maybe I don't even know that you need to look into how to use AI. I think you just need to look into how you're going to make a living now because a lot of these tools are definitely going to wipe out kind of the lower market kind of low quality players who were always kind of terrible, let's be honest. But like it's always going, I think I saw somebody write this and I wish I could remember what it was. I think it was in the Times that said like, this is a tool. These are tools. Like we've hyped them up so much and we've made people so paranoid about humans being wiped out by software. And I don't remember people. Actually I do. I shouldn't say that. I'm old enough to remember when people were like, "Will people still know how to write if they use spell check?" Right? I remember that, and I was like, "Because it turns out, yes, we're just like I'm just a terrible speller, and it's not as much of a problem as it used to be for me." So.
Yeah, well, and I think that Ryan, I would love to hear your thoughts on this because my understanding of what, you know, Google is starting to prioritize quality is exactly what Rachel's saying, quality over quantity because of this issue with GPT that you can literally go in and have an article in 12 seconds. But I think anybody who's used these tools, as Rachel was pointing out, like they all kind of look and feel the same, right? They all kind of have the same structures. They all sort of, and I think in Google, you know, I'm going to guess, isn't super thrilled with this. So Ryan, if you could speak to
I mean, 4 days ago, Tim, they dropped their most recent spam update. So I think they dubbed this one Spam Brain as they do. So interesting little telling title. It's Not like the link spam updates. This one is targeted directly to AI stuff. So AI-based spam prevention is the name of that update, very formally. So they are taking it serious. And kind of the aha here is that they're not very good at it. So the reason why AI and generative content gets flagged as such is because the people generating it are that lazy. ChatGPT will pump you out whatever you ask it, but it will always produce it in the same type of commonality where structure and syntax is repeated. We're all familiar with the colon that ChatGPT likes to use in all of its headlines and all of its bulleted lists. People don't change that. They take the output, they publish it right away. And these things, these signatures of syntax that aligns to a ChatGPT output is what's being flagged by Google in part of these spam updates. With that said, it doesn't mean you lose right away. It's flagged as being AI generative. Google does the same stuff themselves. So does Bing. It's when that content that is generative is of low quality. So you're flagged, then you're reviewed for quality, kind of similarly to how your content goes through the traditional algorithms of the past. So that's kind of where Google's at with this. They're always going to kind of chase it. But keep in mind, they're also about to finally update their search experience and roll out their own generative search experience that they dub SGE, Search Generative Experience. So that's on the way. You can see what it looks like today, actually. You can go to Google Labs, open up a Google Chrome tab, you'll find a little lab beaker in the right corner, click on it, enable yourself into the beta. So it's kind of in a test bed right now. And a lot of that has to do with when you see and start experiencing your searches with the SGE experience, you'll see right away it's a totally different search results page than Google is used to. Now, the reason Google search results page looks the way it does today is because of the advertising. That's why this search generative experience is still in beta. They haven't quite baked the advertising bit into it yet. And that's going to be a big crux of Google. This won't roll out until they figure out how to make a buck consistently with it, which undoubtedly I'm sure they will. But please, please try out this experience and you will see the upheaval that is about to happen to traditional organic search as we've known it.
So
Can I hard second that? Sorry.
No, go ahead, Rachel. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I've been playing around with Perplexity, which is one of the newer. Yeah, and like I have to say, so Perplexity is for people that don't know, it is a generative AI search tool. That is what it's not. It is not a generative. It's not a chatbot. It doesn't help you write content. It helps you find search results. And it is gorgeous. I mean, so Bezos threw in $1 billion of his own hard-earned money, and making. I think they're about to hit unicorn status, which I think is really interesting. I've heard the CEO on a couple of different of the tech podcasts that I listen to, and he doesn't even. I just forgot his name. Really smart guy, really interesting pedigree. And when you ask him these kinds of questions, like how is Google going to behave? What's going to happen with advertising? What's going to happen with journalism? What's going to happen with online advertising? All these things. His answer for someone who developed probably one of the sexiest search products I've seen in a very long time was like, basically like, I don't really know. So
look,
interesting. It's interesting.
If Perplexity AI definitely shook Google. That was one of the disruptors that came in, and it's simply because of how it works. And like you've mentioned, it's not going to write you content, but it is going to bring you back sources of information to the questions you query with it. That citation of sources almost entirely comes from this backbone built off of other threaded platforms like Quora and Reddit. That's what shook Google. the information base isn't an index of websites. It's an index of threaded information. And for a lot of different industries, Perplexity is the ultimate kind of search engine. And that's what Google is going to try to replicate. Perplexity even scrapes Slack. So any bit of threaded information, this type of reaction by Google made them go back to the Reddit well and just sign up on a major partnership. So that's mutually inclusive for them as well, because they're going to sell them cloud services, and then they're going to have kind of cheap rates to scrape the data, which I think is cool.
Yeah, so it's interesting that there's sort of two pieces to this. I think the Perplexity thing is super fascinating and is like building, and I think is something that businesses should keep an eye on. But I want to go back to the Google generative AI answers real quick to really explain to people what we mean by this. So like if you have currently, right, let's say a top 5, top 3 search ranking on a term, right? It's right at the top. Right. And it generally, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like most of the traffic, SEO traffic, comes from those top 5, really those top 10.
Almost 95% in the top 3 clicks.
But what's going to happen when the generative AI answers come, that box at the top is massive. I mean, we're not, you used to be like right here. That generative AI answer is really like half of the screen, which then means that like all of that traffic that you're used to, those people will have to go down further, which probably is where things sit in the 10 to 20 range now. And I think we're going to see, and like you should check labs out, folks, if you want to see it. But like, what do we say to people in the short term that like depend on that traffic, whether they're a B2B or, they're a local business that's just trying to rank because their dentist office is, in 2 blocks of somebody. Like, what's going to happen to that traffic when those answers come in?
It's if you held down the top 3, the majority of your traffic is attributed to that top 3 visibility. The rest of page 1, you're in position 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 or 11. That's where you find your incremental performance. But it's not going to be your core of your traffic trend. With that said, anything below those 3, you're going to lose. You're going to lose those clicks. As a result, you want to be paying attention to the 3 suggestive questions that Google will offer at the bottom of this SGE experience. In fact, they even throw another search bar there. And if you look closely, that search bar is bigger than the one on the top. That's kind of revolutionary for a search results page that hasn't changed much over the last decade or so. So there are strategies in that presentation that will start to pop out to you, a la the people also ask, where everyone saw the exact match questions that they needed to go race to answer. Similar to that, there'll be 3 that are suggested by Google. This is the natural progression in a topic and a set of search strings, and they're just conditioning you along to that. So you have to pay very, very close attention to it. And in most of those experiences, they're very akin to an answer box, right? Or a featured result. It's very text-based. It's got a lot of information. It pulls out the snippet and it offers one source, or this is where we cited this information from. With SGE, you can expect that first part of the experience to give 3 sources. If the topic is comprehensive enough, that experience will carry further down the page, as Tim explained. And in each of those additional sections, they'll offer up one more additional source. So in my experience, day to day working with this, I try to chronicle how many sources are available on that page. On average, it's 7. So if it's a big, huge topic, you can even search SGE as your first test. There will be 7 sources that return to that and 3 supporting questions. So Google's tip in the hat. A good strategy is to take all your keywords, your core keywords that you hold down top 3 visibility for, and run a search through SGE to see how impacted your core traffic attributing keywords are going to be affected by the shift in this search experience. That's kind of the best way to plan for how you will be impacted by this and how much you'll be impacted by this. But really, those top 3, Tim, like you said, they are the core.
And it sounds to me also, so obviously for everybody, this is a massive shift that is going to require, a fair amount of work to research and figure this out. But I'm also hearing that the quality of that content is going to be as important as well. So this isn't just a technical fix here, right? It's or like, posting these same things in different places, but it's really like that core content. And Rachel, I'd love to hear from you on this. Like, the just relying on ChatGPT answers isn't going to cut it for you. And like, you really do need that authentic voice that knows your brand and can write that content so that when Google finds it, it's like, no, this is a legitimate source and this deserves to be in a top ranking.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that is never going to change is that whatever it is that you produce needs to be sort of editorial grade if you want to be taken seriously. And I think that ChatGPT will help people execute sort of, I'll say, sort of non-strategic copy. So in other words, like if it doesn't have to, if the copy just has to sit and be flat and non-dynamic, and you don't have a very big budget, you couldn't have worked with me anyway, because I would have to smile and go, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, so I think for smaller companies that are just getting off the ground, that need help doing email campaigns, like, maybe ChatGPT is going to help you out quite a bit. But I think like if I were sitting down across from someone who's got 250 employees, a marketing budget of $2 to $3 million a year, et cetera, which is probably kind of the sweet spot for all 3 of us, give or take, or one of them. I would say, well, there's 2 things you need to think about. One is work with someone who's has lived through at least one significant moment of communication fragmentation before in their career, right? So if you're dealing with somebody because this is not part of this conversation, but there's 3 kind of major disruptions that are happening right now. One is journalism is changing quite a bit. So you're not going to have that blended mix of search results where you're sitting next to like an editorial or a New York Times article. That's over. The social universe is fragmenting quite a bit right now, because I think people are just like their habits are changing, and that is going to be true with search too. So it's one thing to talk to someone like Ryan about like, well, what's Google going to do? And the other thing you have to talk to someone who's like, well, it's also not about what Google's going to do. It's about what are consumers going to do now? Because when you see a fragmentation like this, which we haven't seen in search since really kind of the beginning of the internet, right? Since what Yahoo gave Google the keys to their own castle kind of thing. Seriously, like that was kind of it. Is talking to someone who can say, well, okay, so let's talk about your people. Let's talk about who your people are. Who are your customers? How do they typically find you? What is the kind of information that they want? And you're going to need to work with people like us, not to toot our own horns, but it's kind of the reality, that can sniff out, well, I know that that's where they used to be, but maybe people are going to go back to the oldie timey days of going directly to a vertical. I mean, perish the thought, right? Like if you want to read about what's going on in the kind of advertising marketplace, maybe you're just going to go right to Adweek, or maybe you're going to go right to Fast Company, or maybe you're going to go right to Wired Magazine, and you're going to search there. And that publication is going to have a very smart chatbot or generative AI search tool that's going to help you contextually understand their entire reservoir of content. Now, I think that is going to be interesting and fascinating. But if you're a business leader, even if you're the marketing person at a small company, you don't have the bandwidth to pay attention to that kind of stuff. It's just impossible, right? So I think that's where I sort of see it, is that it's about sort of the rebirth of information discovery is kind of how I'm thinking about it, which is a big deal.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. It's less so.
I write for a living. Thank you, Ryan. That makes me feel good. That's all I want is praise, just so you know. Like, we just met, but like, that's fine. Just keep coming.
I pull buzz lines for a living, so I'm going to be stealing that one. So I always think of this as like an inbound, outbound kind of upheaval or convergence, or really evolution, where we're going to see less outbound traffic coming in from search engines. There's going to be a little bit less engagement in that channel, but engagement is marketing, whether it's social, whether it's search, that's the name of the game. So you could take your content and position it in a lot of different forms so it can perform and engage wherever your dream customers are. So your content will go out and seek them. And I like to call them content tripwires, where you produce a blog post, take that same blog post and you run it through GPT and you say, produce me a video script. You take the video script and you hire a video production company or some kid that knows how to do the hot video tool, and you have him create you a video, text to video, which are available now. And now you have your video content, the best kind of video content, especially for the advent of SGE. And this is going to be a huge kind of next level tip. Long form, horizontal video content will always win forever. And the reason why is because it is more engaging than the short form stuff that goes by like that. However, short form lives on social, does very well on social. Brands struggle to produce that type of content. Your long form video is your secret to winning the short form game. Again, activate another AI, feed it an hour-long video, and it'll cut up your podcast into 30 snackable vertical bits that you can distribute all over your social media. That's where we're at now with taking one piece of video and making it go a little bit more to the inbound flight in these social platforms so you can create these tripwires. Doesn't necessarily have to be a full hour long form video constitutes anything. I would say over 5 minutes, right around 10 minutes is the sweet spot. A lot of people struggle with this because they need to record themselves. Brands struggle with this because they haven't identified their talking head. Brands must personify themselves to do well on social. The secret to that is that long form video. So start creating them, cut them up. You'll win social as a result. And in the interim, you're going to win SGE. When you're playing around with these SGE searches, notice how much video comes back. Notice how much of that video is vertical. Notice the links on them, and also notice where they're hosted. And almost all of them are going to be hosted on YouTube. So YouTube wins the future after all of this. And it makes sense because it's all about engagement.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, when we talk about marketing, we talk about social in particular, and I know it's not a true social network like some of the others, but like people sleep on YouTube, and it's kind of crazy to me that's happening, because you're right. Like, both the long form perspective, like Google is the second largest search engine in the world on its own. Part of the reason why Google pulls from it so much, like there is a lot that can be done there. And also these videos, I want to emphasize, like, yeah, they can't just be like terrible videos, but like they don't need to be highly produced. It doesn't require tens of thousands of dollars for each of these videos. Like, I mean, like this one's a great example, right? Like this is going to be more than 10 minutes, obviously, but like, we'll be cutting this up and using the bits. There's a lot of really useful information. I'll also post the full version on YouTube if people want to see the whole thing. And this session is costing approximately $16. I'm not going to count the time that you guys would get paid, but like, I use a tool to broadcast this. It's $16. You pay for a year, and then you get Like, you can stream all of this. We've got, now we were up to 75 people at one point. We're still holding that 57 after 35 minutes on SEO. So thank you to everybody hanging on. But it's true. Like, and I think that, it's a challenging world for marketing teams now because marketing teams are shrinking. And that is, there's lots of factors of that. So there are a lot of, but there's so much more work to be done now than even there was 5 or 10 years ago. And I think and I'm gonna sell a little bit and then I'll shut up. But like, I think that's why we are seeing success and why, we have partnered with Ryan and Libby Inside on some SEO stuff. But like, people are coming to us, asking for all, help with all of these things, which they can essentially get all of that for the cost of, we'll say, maybe depending on the level, an FTE. But it's a very complex world. So as the marketers that are listening here, or the folks in leadership in B2B, it's like, this is complicated. And I'm sure some of this has seemed like overwhelming. And that's why it's like really, really difficult for teams now to do all of this, right? Like, I got to post on social. I got to do videos. I got to write SEO content. I got to do all these things. And the reality is, yes, you do. It's a huge competitive advantage if you can do it. But that also doesn't mean for the smaller folks, like, there aren't things that they can do too. It's just like, the folks that are jumping in now on the generative AI train are the ones that they're gonna succeed, right? If they can figure it out now, they're gonna succeed. But yeah, I mean, I think like it's such
I think there's an even playing field to what you're suggesting. It's not that the small guy is at a disadvantage to the big guys. It's almost an equal prosperity with this advent of AI. It means you could be as capable as the effort you put into it, type of thing. And kind of the underlying theme to all of these solutions is, if you put crap in, you get crap out.
Totally.
So it really does come down to that person to essentially multiply themselves. And we're at this era where it is happening today, right? I call it the age of the agent, where AI solutions will execute your to-do list. This isn't a tomorrow thing, it's a yesterday thing. And people are doing this, magnifying themselves, their capabilities, their reach, as a one-person shop. That is why it's so imperative for these brands that are larger, these teams that are bigger and more capable, to not sit on their hands, because they're competing with the little guy now, almost like in an uncomparable way. So I think having more autonomy, being more singular, is a huge advantage when you're comparing to produce content that lines up against some of these bigger logos that are out there and used to doing this.
I think too, just to add to that, and I agree with every syllable of that we entered. So again, like, speaking of people that are used to like seeing fragmentation or seeing, the pace of change sort of oversweep entire industries. I could never imagine that the recording industry, when I grew up in the 1980s, would not exist by the time I was 30. And so I've seen how consumers will suddenly be like, I don't care how much money so-and-so put into that company, I'm not going to use it, but I'm going to do this over here. And it's always unexpected. But from like, I would say like 05 until ChatGPT sort of blew up, a year-ish, 2 years, whatever, a year-ish ago, a lot of companies were living with this, sort of had this false notion that because all of this was digital, anybody could do it, and that it was easy and fast. And just because they were used to print, right? So there was a whole generation of people that were like, well, we got to lay it out, and you got to have people that know how to lay out stuff, and you got to have people that know, oh, well, you're using Photoshop, so you don't need as much time. And that may be true to some extent, but the truth is that you still needed somebody who was a really good graphic designer to use Photoshop. I can't use, I'm terrible at it. So with the advent of these tools, I don't think if you're a marketer, you should panic. No one's going to replace you. But to Ryan's point, they're going to suddenly expect that you do a lot more with less, which is why it's helpful to partner with someone to say, can you just back me up here? We shouldn't even be over here in this space, even though it's buzzy right now, right? Like I shouldn't care about that, right? And you can say yes or no or whatever. But it's always going to be helpful to have people who can point you to like, well, did you know that because you're a B2B company and because you make, airline parts or something, there's a consortium of, this is all completely made up, but I can completely see this happening right now because of how completely exciting of a time it is. If that's not clear from my dulcet tones, I am super excited right now. Like I can't wait. Like I'm into this. But again, like there could be a consortium of major airline players that say we started our own AI search company because we are so tired of bad information and we want to be able to at least inform people in a sort of a sane and rational way, and we're not charging anybody for this. It's free because we just want people to in our industry to have good information, and we don't need like advertising money. So like those are the kind of things that I think Ryan is talking about, where there are going to be thousands of creative solutions that we can't imagine right now, but the point is having somebody who's plugged in and kind of batting for you, who can help you sort of. It's always about separating the noise from the music, right? And so that's what you need, is somebody that can be like, that's just noise, don't worry about it, you don't need to worry about this. This is something that I think makes sense for you, your resources, your knowledge. You need to go to like a weekend seminar because you don't know anything about this, and you should spend more time talking to Tim or me or whoever, because this is really important, but the rest of it you can literally tune out. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of commodities like within it, and it's to businesses that could be a good thing, right? There's efficiencies there. We can save on people, we can increase our outputs, but in the reality of it is you have to make sense of all of those commodities. You have to use those tools effectively in a standardized workflow, build a tight tech stack for it, and you need someone to kind of envision all of that, or you are falling behind. Funny thing though, that I do notice about this space is that a tool will come out that is very concept based, and it requires a lot of configuration and a lot of steps, but it's moving mountains in its output. You can think of the early text to video, or a lot of the deep fakes, or the lip like emulating outputs. If you just wait a few weeks, what took multiple kind of like deprecated steps, or different paths to get to it, there will be a solution that comes out that's relatively free, if not totally free, that does all of it at once. That's how fast this space is moving, and that's why it's so important to have someone keep tabs on all of that. Otherwise, you're just going to be scrolling through these snackable little buzzwords and never know if the dust actually settled and how you can make use of these commodities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is you've both pointed out is it's impossible for really any one person to be able to keep track of all that stuff. But the folks that do pay attention to it are the ones that are going to benefit. And I know what's going to happen is that in the next few years, there are going to be countless businesses that look back and go, if I had only like focused on this now, like we would be in a completely different space. And you're right. It is a mix of, finding the right video content and writing the right content authentically, and not just saying, ChatGPT, write me 100 blog posts on this term or whatever, which I see people posting about on LinkedIn, which I assume the bill is going to come due on that very soon. And those people are going to all of a sudden see their traffic drop through the floor, especially as more people sort of realize the power of AI. And the AI is not a replacement for people. It is making people more efficient and allowing them to focus on talking about their products and being more creative, but they don't have to do the 85 steps that you might have had to do before to create some of this content. But don't just rely on it, because those people they will not see the results of the people who sort of take the mixed approach of both authenticity and AI. Those are the people I think that we'll see like have real big successes, not only in the next few years, but really the next few months. This stuff is moving incredibly fast. I mean, ChatGPT hasn't even been out for a year yet, or maybe it's been out for a year now. But like, it hasn't been that long.
ChatGPT hasn't been out for a year, but GPT has been out for a year. But GPT-4 has not been out for a year.
Right.
And that thing, speaking of work stacks, I mean, if it weren't such a resource hog, I'd have it open all the time. It is a terrible resource hog for a web-based product. But like, I use it a lot. And I'm not going to use it less. I mean, you know, so that was 6 months ago. And the jump in quality between 3.5 and 4, so 4 is the current enterprise version, is it took my hair off. I mean, I was like, whoa, okay. I'm going to sit up a little bit taller. And again, like, I'll just build on what Tim was saying, if you don't mind for a second. Again, if the way you make money is by attracting people to come to your website, and convincing them to click on a link to buy some skincare products or consumer goods is usually where this falls into. If you're a media outlet where that's how you supplement your advertising income, it's going to get tough. I mean, I don't want to undersell that. That is going to be where a lot of the sort of chatter gets focused. But here we are. So what are you going to do, right? And so I think that's the answer, is like, don't be afraid and don't back down. Become inventive. Figure it out, right? Like, if you deserve to be on the internet, if you have things that you want to tell people, if you have information that people need to have, figure out a different way to do it, or throw your arms around it and get your head around it. Tim's right. Get your head around it today, because this stuff is like, it's not even a Corvette. It's like watching a NASCAR race. Like, you can feel it, right? Like, you can feel it in your bones.
Well, and I think this is a good. I'm going to ask one final question. We're about 46 minutes, so I think we've had a really good conversation, and I'm going to end it with, and we're all going to answer this question. And unless somebody has a question, now would be the time to ask it. But what do people do? What do people do now who have heard this and they're a little nervous, that they feel that they haven't been focused on this, and they see the opportunities here, and maybe they only have a marketing team of 5 or less, so they don't have a lot of resources. What do they do? What's the first thing that they should do?
Personify their brand. If they do so successfully, and you take a logo and you turn it into a person or a likeness, that likeness is internally authentic. That is your lifeline in competing against the dredge of generative content that you'll live amongst. So people are authentic in themselves. They will find the real authentic bits within all of that clutter. And that's what will persist as being authentic in the future and winning. This is the struggle, though, that brands have. That's why having a talking head is so important. Brands have come around to going out and buying influencers, right? I'll buy this for this campaign, and I'll hit these 70 influencers. If it works that way, it also works to say, find your brand evangelists and hire them. That's your talking head. They're producing content anyway. This will keep you viable in the future and lend to that personification that your logo needs to do to be authentic, to stay relevant in the future. That's my one answer for you, Tim.
Okay, I like it. Rachel, what do you think?
So I always like to answer questions like that with like what I'm doing, because I will admit, when the first time I used GPT, I was like, am I going to have a career? Because I am a writer. And I specialize in the kind of things that GPT does pretty well. And so what I did is I took a step back and I found experts to listen to. So if you're a marketer, or a business leader that has a huge foot in the digital space of some kind, whether it's that you generate a lot of leads through inbound traffic, or you do a lot of outbound marketing, find experts in the space, figure out where they are, and listen to them, and take a deep breadth. You do need to start paying attention, but it doesn't mean that you need to supplant that with bad decisions. And so what I find is that right now, when you're going through this like massive hype cycle, every enterprise journalist and their mother is writing a terrible article about AI in whether it's like a newspaper or like a lifestyle magazine that has no business writing about AI. So find those domain experts who are really know what they're talking about, have deep relationships with people who develop this kind of technology, and listen, spend at least 2 to 3 hours a week listening to podcasts, speaking about YouTube. There's plenty of wonderful content on YouTube from excellent experts who are, basically like professional journalists of some stripe, who will at least help you from feeling so overwhelmed. And then you can start to develop your own lexicon and your own language for what it is that you think you need to do for your own business.
That's great. I'm going to answer it a little bit differently than the both of you, which you gave more context for people to do on their own. My other recommendation, and I got to sell it, is talk to us. Like, we have been looking at this stuff. We've been talking about this stuff, and we know, nobody fully knows the path, and anybody who tells you they fully know the path, you should run away from, because that is not true. And this place is moving so quickly that it's not possible. But this crew here has been looking at this stuff for a long time. Ryan has been deep in the AI world since, it's funny because it's like, the last couple of years, it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but in this space, it's almost like you're factoring it like quantum time. Like, it's just a completely different element, but we can help you figure this out. And, and not in a way that necessarily breaks the bank, but can kind of give you a roadmap forward. So if you'd like to do that, you can obviously ping us after this, and we'd be happy to chat. And that said, we do have one. We're going to wrap with this question from our good friend Daniel Olduck, one of my former colleagues at WeWork. We worked very closely together on the WeWork search stuff. And his is, what's everyone's favorite safe marketing AI tool or use case that they feel is being overlooked?
Right. It's a classic Daniel question.
Yes.
You know exactly how he words those things. I'll give you a simple one since we're on LinkedIn. Tapleo. What Tapleo is going to do is it's going to allow you to post engaging content that is generated based on your old posts. So it's going to learn everything about your tone, your character, how you go to the well to produce information, and it's going to base that on new generative content in posts that it produced. It's also going to go and find topics that are inherent to the stuff that you like to cover, and it's going to keep you on brand, so to speak. So it's going to supercharge your LinkedIn posting. You may notice some of your favorite LinkedIn people that keep pumping content out, and you kind of wonder how or why they're using these AI solutions. And the last little bit to it is it helps you engage with commentary. So it's going to find a whole bunch of posts that align to your topics that are in your swim lane, and it suggests very quickly ways that you can quickly comment on those things, and it'll even use AI to answer as yourself if you wanted to. Those tools are winning the engagement game on LinkedIn. So very helpful. I would consider it safe because it's built on everything you've ever written, and it won't kind of skew past that. So there's the safeness that you were looking for, Daniel.
Well, that's a great one, for sure. I haven't used that, so I need to check it out. But Rachel, what is your favorite one?
I don't know that I have a good answer. Great question. I don't know, because I have been in the B2B space, and B2B is always a bit more, I'll say, conservative. It's less about volume, and it's more about being targeted, precise, high quality, things like that. So I'm going to say me. I am my favorite safe AI marketing tool, because I sort of thank you very much. It's the truth. I mean, I am spending a fair amount of time using tools that I think make sense, and because again, I'm one of those people who has lived through. I don't like using the word disruptions anymore. I'll say fragmented moments, right, where everything was all here, and then the walled garden was broken, and we all scattered to the four winds, and what's to become of us, and the world's going to end, and then it didn't, and it just means that there were legacy players that had to accept defeat, and they kind of, were the yellow pages. They went away. We were all fine. And I'm very good now because of all of that time that I have spent in all of these different, whether it's the entertainment industry, which I've spent a lot of time working in, or just various tech spaces. I'm very good at looking at, like, speaking of LinkedIn, being like, I don't need your premium tool to help me generate posts, LinkedIn. That is nonsense. No one should pay for that. That's ridiculous. And seeing where there's this rush to just shoehorn in every cool new thing and the FOMO and all that, where I'm like, yeah, that's okay. Let's just give it a minute. Like, there's things that are useful and helpful, and I'm gonna, whether it's with Tim and I and folks like Ryan who work in the team, we're gonna help you go. Don't even worry about that. Like,
Right.
it's just not necessary. You don't need that right now. We will tell you when you need it, right? And then we will use it to the nth degree, but you probably don't need to worry about it right now unless someone like me tells you that you need to worry about it.
Right. And it's incredibly overwhelming at the moment, right? There are so many tools and there's so many overlapping tools that essentially do the same thing. So you could say you like, and I'll mention one in a second, but you can say that you like this tool, and that the person next to you is like, oh, I've never heard of that. I like this one. And then you talk and it's the exact same thing. So it is difficult to navigate this because there's a new one that pops up every day, and it's hard to tell which ones are legit and which ones are, not really what they're cracked up to be. So I'm going to give two. I'm going to cheat a little bit. So the first one is a tool called Opus, which is a tool that does what Ryan was sort of mentioning before, where you could take, like, this is going to be an hour-long session. I'm going to download this afterwards, and I'm going to upload it to Opus, and it's going to crank out 30 shorter clips on a time that I set. It could be 30, 60, it could be 2 minutes, and it's going to score them. So, and the scoring is, you got to kind of look at it, but like it gives you, the ones that they think are most interesting and engaging down to the ones that maybe are not as much. And obviously it requires, like all of these tools, some, the human touch to look at these and be like, is this really right? Is this not? And it also will turn them into these horizontals into verticals. So if you're putting them on other social channels, it's helpful. I'm not somebody that is very good at video editing, which is probably an understatement. So like having that is very helpful to me. The other one that I have seen over the last week, and Ryan or Rachel, I haven't really even talked to you, is that the new version of Claude 3 has come out, and which is essentially a competitor to GPT-4. And I have been, so far, I haven't used it a ton, but I've been pretty impressed. The answers are I think so far, a little more authentic. They're not like, and maybe that ends up being their shtick, and then that's not authentic anymore, but like they feel a little more human in their answers than GPT-4. We'll see if that really pans out. I've only used it a few times, but those are the two that I would say are some. And all of the ones that I mentioned are free. I assume there are free versions of the ones you guys mentioned as well. So these are things that you could easily check out. So
good point with Claude. Claude's free, right?
Yeah.
It's also, if you're a power user of ChatGPT and you could tell the difference between the models and the outputs, you're probably ripe for Claude. And the reason why is because of the context window that solution allows for versus what a ChatGPT allows for. Even in 4, you're talking like a token limit. With
right.
Claude, you have 1 million tokens, right? So it's not even an issue. And that will be an issue if you become a power user in some of these kind of first flight models, like the OpenAI variety.
Right. Cool. Well, guys, we held 48 people for an hour. So I hope that says that people have found this to be very useful and helpful. And I want to thank everybody for sticking with us. I know I very rarely watch a LinkedIn Live for an hour, so I know like what a time, how much time that is for folks. So I appreciate that. I want to thank both Ryan and Rachel for joining me today. I think this has been a really fascinating conversation, and my final pitch, like if you are interested in learning more, or you just want to pick someone's brain about this, feel free to just drop me a DM or in the comments below. and one of us will get on the horn with you and sort of talk through your questions and what you need. So thank you again, folks. We'll do another session here soon. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.